camera fades in from black, revealing a dimly lit Victorian-era study. A single candle flickers on a desk, casting long, haunting shadows. Poirot's figure is barely visible in the corner, his sharp eyes glinting with the weight of a mystery unraveling before him. Poirot, in a hushed tone, speaks directly to the camera, his voice like velvet, but heavy with gravity. A family's darkest secret is about to be revealed. But not everyone is ready for the truth. In a world of hidden treasures and buried legacies, one mistake could destroy everything. What if you discovered that the very thing you've been protecting was the thing that would ruin you? The camera zooms in on a silver locket resting on a desk, the glow of the candle dancing across its polished surface, leaving an eerie sense of foreboding. Stay with me, and you'll see how far the past will go to keep its secrets buried. Until now. The sound of a door creaking open. Poirot's eyes meet the camera once more, and his voice lowers. Don't turn away. This is only the beginning. The screen fades to black, with the words appearing slowly in elegant serif font. If you want to know what happens next, like, share, and subscribe. The truth is waiting, and so is the next chapter. Chapter 1. A Tragic Reunion. It was a quiet afternoon in London, the kind of stillness that only a city blanketed by fog could possess. The streets were lined with old buildings, their stone facades softened by the mist that curled around them like a shroud. At a small cafe near Piccadilly Circus, a figure sat at a corner table, his sharp eyes scanning the world through the steam rising from a cup of coffee. Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective of unrivaled intellect and unparalleled method, was in his usual state of contemplation. His immaculate suit, his waxed mustache, and the precise arrangement of his belongings all told the story of a man who valued order above all else. Yet today, his mind was not occupied by the usual puzzles of logic and reason. No, today something felt different. As he stirred his coffee with a silver spoon, he noticed a figure approaching him, tall, thin, with a coat that fluttered in the wind like a flag of surrender. The man's face was drawn, his brow furrowed, in a way that hinted at the deep weight of grief. "Excuse me, Monsieur Poirot," the man said, his voice almost a whisper, as though the very act of speaking might shatter something delicate. He was clearly in distress. Poirot's keen eyes studied him carefully, noting the tremor in his hand as he removed his gloves. "I am in desperate need of your assistance," the man continued. "My name is Edmund Sinclair, and I come to you with a most pressing matter, one that involves my sister, Victoria." He paused, and for a brief moment, his eyes seemed to look inward, as if he were struggling to hold back tears. Poirot set his coffee cup down gently, his attention fully focused on the man. Edmund. Sinclair's agitation was palpable, but so was his underlying sense of hope. Hope that perhaps Poirot's legendary skills could unravel the mystery that had him so undone. "Tell me, Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot said in his soft, precise accent, "what is it that has brought you to me today?" The man took a deep breath before answering, his words coming out in a rush. "My sister, Victoria, has gone missing. She vanished 2 days ago from our family estate in Hampshire. She was last seen in the drawing room, sitting by the fire reading a book. The housekeeper saw her just before supper, and then—" His voice faltered for a moment, and he glanced down at the table, as though searching for words that would make sense of the impossible. Poirot leaned forward ever so slightly, his hands steepled in front of him, the tips of his fingers gently touching each other. He said nothing, allowing the silence to do its work. Edmund continued, his voice now laced with a sense of helplessness. There was one thing, however, that has us all baffled. Victoria always wore a silver locket, a family heirloom passed down from my grandmother. When we searched her room, we found the locket on her dressing table, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. Poirot's sharp gaze flickered toward the man, his mind already working, his thoughts moving like clockwork. The locket, the object that had been mentioned twice already, was more than a mere piece of jewelry. It was a symbol, perhaps, of something much more significant. But what was it that had caused Victoria Sinclair to vanish without a trace? "Tell me, Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot asked softly, his voice a perfect blend of gentleness and precision. "Did anyone see her leave the house? Were there any unusual events leading up to her disappearance?" The man's face seemed to harden as he spoke again, though his words were barely above a whisper. "No one saw her leave. She simply vanished. And that's what frightens us. We've had no word from her, no indication of where she might be. The only clue is that locket." Poirot sat back in his chair, his mind already turning over the puzzle. He had learned enough, at least to begin. Edmund Sinclair's sister, Victoria, had disappeared under the most mysterious of circumstances. And the silver locket, the very thing she always wore, seemed to hold the key. But what was its true significance? Why had it been left behind? And most importantly, who had taken her? "I will take your case, Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot said, his tone resolute. "There is much to be discovered, but rest assured, we shall uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it is hidden." Edmund's face softened, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I knew you were the one who could help us." As Edmund stood to leave, Poirot's sharp gaze followed him. The case was set, but the answers were still, cloaked in mystery. Poirot had a feeling, one of those rare, inexplicable instincts, that this would be a case unlike any other. The locket was not merely a trinket of family history. No, it was far more. And before long, the truth would emerge from its shadowed depths, bringing light to the mystery of Victoria Sinclair's disappearance. But for now, all Poirot could do was wait. Wait for the pieces of the puzzle to fall into place, and for the secrets hidden within the silver locket to be revealed. Chapter 2. The Family Estate. The next day, the sun rose lazily over the English countryside, casting a golden hue over the vast fields surrounding the Sinclair family estate. The estate, nestled within the tranquil hills of Hampshire, was a grand sight to behold, but its looming presence was more somber than majestic on this particular morning. A cold wind swept through the tall trees lining the long drive, the leaves whispering secrets to anyone who cared to listen. Hercule Poirot, along with Captain Hastings, arrived at the estate in the early hours, their carriage gently rattling along the winding path that led them to the front door. The grandeur of the house, a sprawling Georgian manor with ivy-clad walls and towering windows, seemed almost out of place, as though it were a relic of another time. Yet despite its old-world charm, there was something disquieting about it, something that whispered of secrets kept hidden in the shadows. As the carriage came to a halt in front of the massive front doors, Poirot took a moment to observe his surroundings. The estate was eerily silent, Its only sounds the rustling of the trees and the distant call of birds. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as though the very land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge. "Monsieur Poirot?" Edmund Sinclair greeted them, his face pale and drawn as he stood at the top of the stairs. "Thank you for coming. I trust your journey was comfortable?" Poirot inclined his head slightly, his expression as calm as ever. "The journey was pleasant, monsieur. But now I must ask, where is your sister's room?" Edmund's eyes shifted nervously, and he motioned for them to follow him inside. "This way. I'll show you the drawing room where Victoria was last seen. After that, we can go to her private chambers." The interior of the estate was as grand as its exterior, filled with elegant furnishings and delicate, priceless antiques. The air was heavy with the scent of wood polish and lavender, the same fragrance that Poirot had noticed in the cafe the previous day when Edmund had first approached him. The drawing room was a place of faded elegance. The large fireplace, with its mantel covered in family portraits, loomed at the far end, and the heavy curtains had been drawn, casting the room in soft, muted light. The floor was covered in thick rugs, and a lone armchair sat by the fire, exactly where Edmund had said his sister had been sitting. Poirot walked across the room slowly, his eyes scanning every detail. The furniture was meticulously arranged, as though no one had touched it in days. The only sign of disturbance was the open book on the armchair's seat, its pages marked with a fine ribbon that Victoria had obviously used to keep her place. Hastings, ever the curious one, knelt down beside the chair, examining the book with interest. "It's an old volume of poetry," he noted. "By Keats, I believe?" Poirot nodded, his mind already working. The book seemed innocuous enough, but there was something unsettling about its presence. He moved to the mantelpiece, studying the portraits that lined the walls. Faces stared back at him, each one seemingly locked in time, each one bearing the weight of secrets that had yet to be uncovered. "It is clear that nothing in this room has been disturbed, Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot said after a moment, his voice quiet, thoughtful. "Not the book, nor the chair? Yet you are certain that your sister was here and then vanished?" Edmund's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Yes, I am sure. The housekeeper saw her only minutes before she was last seen. Then, nothing." Poirot turned, his gaze piercing yet soothing in its calmness. "Perhaps, Monsieur Sinclair, you have not told me everything. Did your sister have any visitors? Any letters or correspondence?" Edmund shifted uncomfortably. "There was a letter, yes," he confessed. "But she did not mention it to anyone. It was only discovered after her disappearance, in her room. I thought it irrelevant. But now?" His voice trailed off, the weight of the mystery bearing down on him. Poirot's interest piqued. "May I see the letter?" Edmund hesitated for a moment before retrieving a small envelope from his jacket pocket and handing it over. The letter was simple, unmarked, and written in a flowing script. Poirot took it in his hands and examined it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he read the contents. "The truth lies in the heart of the past. Beware the one who seeks to uncover it, for the locket holds the key." The words seemed cryptic, almost poetic in their ominousness. Poirot's lips curled into a slight smile, not of amusement, but of satisfaction. The letter was clearly a warning. Someone wanted the truth to remain buried. But who? And why? Poirot passed the letter to Hastings, who read it with furrowed brows. Do you think this is the work of someone who's been watching the family? He asked. Poirot stood still for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed at the room once more. I do not believe this was an ordinary disappearance, my friend. I suspect someone has been playing a dangerous game, one that involves not just Victoria, but her family's history. The locket is more than a simple piece of jewelry, it seems. It holds a secret worth more than just gold or silver. Edmund's voice trembled as he spoke, his desperation clear. Do you think she's in danger, Monsieur Poirot? Poirot turned to face him, his expression calm but firm. Indeed, I believe your sister was not simply taken away. She is hiding, Monsieur Sinclair, hiding from those who seek the truth that the locket holds. As Poirot and Hastings followed Edmund upstairs to Victoria's room, the air seemed to grow colder, as if the house itself was bracing for something that was about to unfold. The door creaked open, revealing a room that seemed untouched, yet eerily void of its owner. There was no sign of a struggle, only a sense of emptiness that filled the space like a heavy fog. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes scanning every corner. The bed was perfectly made. The vanity mirror gleamed with an almost unnatural shine, and a faint trace of lavender lingered in the air. But it was the small silver locket, resting on the vanity table, that caught Poirot's attention. He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. The locket was intricately designed, its surface polished to a mirror-like finish. There was no inscription, no sign of age, yet Poirot knew it was not merely a trinket. It held a history, a mystery, waiting to be unlocked. Ah, mon ami, Poirot murmured, this is where our story truly begins. As he stood there, holding the silver locket in his hands, the entire house seemed to whisper its secrets, and Poirot knew, deep in his gut, that the key to solving this case was hidden in plain sight. But where? And who had the answers? Only time would tell. Chapter 3. The Letter. The morning mist still clung to the ground, swirling like ghosts around the towering estate as Poirot and Hastings sat in the grand dining room of the Sinclair family estate, sipping tea. The steady tick-tock of the clock on the wall punctuated the silence, each second seeming to stretch longer than the last. The morning sun filtered through the large windows, casting long shadows on the polished oak floor. Despite the comforting atmosphere, there was a tension in the air that could not be ignored. Poirot sat back in his chair, his hands neatly folded before him, his mind far from the warmth of the room. The silver locket lay on the table before him, its polished surface catching the light in delicate flashes. The case had already taken many twists and turns, but the letter, a simple, unsigned note, had added an unexpected layer of complexity. Hastings, on the other hand, seemed preoccupied with the letter, his brows furrowed as he turned it over in his hands for the 100th time. "It's strange, Poirot," he said quietly. "Why would Victoria keep a letter like this, one with such cryptic words, without telling anyone about it? And why leave it behind?" Poirot did not immediately respond. He had been lost in thought, contemplating the words, the meaning behind them, the weight they carried. The letter was more than just a warning. It was a message, one that had been carefully crafted to lead him somewhere. But where? "The truth lies in the heart of the past," Poirot finally murmured, his voice low and reflective. "That is what it says, Hastings, and yet it is more than just a phrase. It is a key to unlocking something buried, something hidden long ago. But what truth? And whose heart? Hastings leaned forward, sensing the growing urgency in Poirot's words. So, you think the letter is connected to the disappearance? Poirot nodded slowly. I do, mon ami. I believe this letter is the clue that will lead us to understanding why Victoria Sinclair is missing and why she left behind the locket. There was a brief silence, and Hastings, though still uncertain, couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. But who would have sent it to her? And why would they want her to find it? Poirot placed his teacup gently back on the saucer, his eyes narrowing as he regarded Hastings. That, mon cher Hastings, is precisely what we must uncover. Whoever wrote this letter knew something about Victoria, something she may not have even realized herself, and they wished her to know it. Poirot's gaze shifted to the window, where the mist had begun to lift, revealing the sprawling grounds of the estate. His thoughts turned to the family history, the generations of Sinclairs that had lived and died within these walls, each leaving behind a legacy, both known and unknown. What secrets had been passed down through the years? What part did Victoria play in this intricate tapestry? The journal. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings made their way to Victoria's private chambers, where the rest of her belongings lay untouched. The room felt eerily still, the silence thick and oppressive. The air was cool, carrying the scent of lavender from the vase by the window. As Poirot carefully examined the contents of the room, Hastings opened one of the drawers and retrieved an old leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, its edges frayed from years of use. He handed it to Poirot with a slight look of curiosity. I found this among her things, Hastings said. It looks like a personal journal. Could this be what we've been looking for? Poirot took the journal in his hands and flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the delicate script written within. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, with a certain quality that bespoke of both intelligence and care. The entries within were not overly detailed, but there were references to events, thoughts, and people that seemed to have significance to Victoria. Poirot stopped at a particular entry, his finger gently tracing the words as he read aloud, almost to himself. I found it today, hidden beneath the floorboards. A letter, carefully folded, its ink still fresh. It speaks of things I do not yet understand, of the past and of secrets locked away for centuries. I do not know what it means, but I must uncover the truth. The locket will be my key. Poirot closed the journal, his face unreadable, but his mind racing. A letter hidden beneath the floorboards, he murmured. This is most intriguing. The truth was hidden from her, perhaps by her own family. And the locket, it seems, was meant to lead her to it. Hastings looked over at him, his expression a mixture of disbelief and concern. So, you think the letter she found was connected to all of this? That she was searching for something that even she didn't fully understand? Precisely, Poirot replied, his voice calm, yet filled with an undeniable intensity. Victoria Sinclair was not simply a victim of her circumstances. She was involved in something far greater, a mystery that spanned generations. The letter was no accident. It was a warning, yes, but also an invitation to uncover the hidden truths that the Sinclair family has kept buried for years. Poirot's gaze shifted back to the silver locket on the table, its gleaming surface now taking on a much darker significance. It was no longer just a family heirloom. It was the key to unraveling a mystery that had been waiting patiently for someone to discover it. The hidden family secret. The more Poirot thought about the letter, the more certain he became that the key to the case lay within the history of the Sinclair family itself. What had Victoria found? What had she uncovered that was so dangerous, so significant, that it caused her to vanish without a trace? Poirot stood up, a sudden realization dawning on him. He turned to Edmund Sinclair, who had been quietly watching the detective's movements. "Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot said, his voice steady and precise. "Tell me about your family's history. There must be something in the past, some event, some lost treasure, something that could explain what your sister was searching for." Edmund hesitated, as though the very question brought up memories he wasn't ready to face. "There are rumors," he said slowly, his voice low, "of a hidden fortune, a legacy of wealth passed down through the generations. But it was lost during the time of my great-grandfather. No one has spoken of it in years, but there are whispers that the treasure still exists, hidden somewhere on the estate." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. "A hidden fortune, you say? And your sister Victoria was searching for it?" "She was obsessed with the idea," Edmund replied, his voice tinged with unease. "She believed the treasure could change everything for our family. But I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just a myth." Poirot walked slowly toward the window, his mind turning over the information. "It seems, Monsieur Sinclair, that your sister was not only searching for answers, she was uncovering a secret that was never meant to be found." The puzzle pieces were beginning to fall into place. The letter, the journal, the silver locket, all were connected to the lost treasure, a legacy that had been buried in the shadows of time. But why had someone gone to such lengths to keep it hidden? And why had Victoria been chosen to uncover the truth? As Poirot stood there, contemplating the next step in his investigation, he couldn't shake the feeling that the mystery was far from over. There were forces at work, hidden hands that were guiding the pieces of the puzzle. And if he was to uncover the truth, he would have to dig deeper into the history of the Sinclair family, past the locket, past the letter, to the very heart of the secret that had been buried for so long. Chapter 4. A suspicious neighbor. The evening air grew cooler as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, casting the Sinclair estate in a soft, amber glow. The tranquility of the countryside felt like an illusion, a facade that only heightened the tension in the air. Poirot stood in the dimly lit hallway of the estate, carefully observing the family portraits that lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow him with silent judgment. The house itself, despite its grandiosity, seemed to hum with hidden secrets that Poirot was determined to uncover. Edmund Sinclair had led Poirot and Hastings to a narrow spiral staircase that wound its way to the second floor. At the top, they paused in front of a closed door, behind which lay the room of Lord Pembroke, Victoria's neighbor, a man whose eccentricities and mysterious nature had long raised suspicions among the Sinclair family. Lord Pembroke was known for his reclusive tendencies. He had been a close friend of the Sinclairs in the past, but his relationship with Victoria had always been marked by an odd, almost obsessive affection. Over the years, however, their interactions had become increasingly rare, and the rumors that swirled about Lord Pembroke's intentions only added to the atmosphere of unease that permeated the estate. Was there more to his friendship with the family than met the eye? Poirot turned to Edmund. Monsieur Sinclair, I must speak with Lord Pembroke. He may hold the key to understanding your sister's disappearance. We must tread carefully, but we cannot afford to ignore his potential connection to the case. Edmund hesitated, a flash of discomfort crossing his face. Lord Pembroke, he is a strange man, but if you believe it necessary, I will take you to him. The door creaked open, revealing a modest yet slightly disordered study. Lord Pembroke was seated behind a large oak desk, his face partially obscured by a thick, bushy beard. He appeared as if he hadn't shaved in days, and his eyes were weary, as though burdened by something that weighed heavily on his soul. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, I see you've come, Lord Pembroke said, his voice raspy and unwelcoming. To investigate the disappearance of young Victoria, I presume? Poirot smiled politely, yet his eyes were sharp, his gaze dissecting Lord Pembroke with surgical precision. Indeed, monsieur, I understand you were close to Miss Sinclair. I hope you do not mind answering a few questions regarding your connection to her. Lord Pembroke's expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked it with a nonchalant shrug. Ah, my connection to her is no secret. I admired Victoria, you could say, but not in the way some might think. I respected her mind, her curiosity. She was intelligent, perhaps too intelligent for her own good. Poirot took a slow, deliberate step forward, his voice gentle but insistent. You spoke of admiration, but you also mentioned her curiosity. Was she perhaps seeking something? Something that she should not have? Lord Pembroke's eyes flickered, and Poirot caught the briefest glimpse of something, guilt or perhaps fear, before it vanished behind a wall of indifference. He cleared his throat. Victoria was always searching for answers, Monsieur Poirot. The truth about everything. She became obsessed with family history, with our shared past. But I warned her, some things are better left alone. Poirot's heart quickened slightly, and his voice lowered, becoming more measured. And what of the letter, Monsieur Pembroke? The one Victoria found? The one that spoke of the locket and the truth hidden in the past? What do you know of it? Lord Pembroke stiffened at the mention of the letter, his hands trembling slightly as he shifted in his chair. The letter? The letter she found? His voice caught in his throat. I don't know what you're talking about. Poirot's gaze never wavered. I believe, Monsieur Pembroke, that you know exactly what I speak of. The letter contained a warning, did it not? A warning for Miss Sinclair to stay away from the locket, to stay away from something that might threaten the peace of the Sinclair family. There was a long, pregnant pause as Lord Pembroke struggled to regain his composure. The room felt suddenly colder, as though the walls themselves were closing in on them. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Poirot, Lord Pembroke finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. You think you can unravel this mystery, but you are simply playing into someone else's game? Poirot stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. You are hiding something, Monsieur Pembroke, and I will find it, no matter how deep you bury it. The silence in the room was palpable. Lord Pembroke looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching nervously. He remained silent for a moment, as if deliberating whether to continue. Finally, he spoke, his words hesitant, as if drawn from him against his will. "It was not supposed to happen this way," Lord Pembroke confessed, his voice barely audible. "I tried to stop her, I did. She was too close. She was about to uncover everything. The treasure, the history, the legacy that has been kept hidden for generations. She was too reckless. And now, she's gone." Poirot's heart raced as the realization hit him like a cold gust of wind. "The treasure," he repeated, more to himself than to Lord Pembroke. "This is not just about a missing person. This is about something far more dangerous. Something that has been buried, not just by the Sinclair family, but by others, for years." Lord Pembroke's eyes flickered with an expression of hopelessness. "It's buried beneath the estate, beneath the very foundation of this house. The treasure. Victoria was too close. She would have found it. And the consequences." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I did what I had to do." Poirot's mind was racing. The treasure, hidden beneath the estate, was the key to everything. But why had Victoria's search for it led to her disappearance? Had she stumbled upon something that someone was willing to kill to protect? And who, exactly, was trying to stop her? Poirot turned to Edmund, who had been standing silently by the door, his face pale with shock. "Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot said quietly, "I believe we are no longer simply searching for your sister. We are uncovering a family secret, a treasure that has been hidden for too long. Someone is trying to keep it buried, and they will stop at nothing to ensure that it remains so." As the weight of Poirot's words settled in the room, the door to the study creaked open, and a sharp voice cut through the stillness. "Is something wrong, Father?" It was a woman's voice, calm yet laced with a quiet concern. Poirot turned sharply, his gaze landing on the figure standing in the doorway. Lord Pembroke's daughter, Eleanor. Her eyes locked with Poirot's, and for the briefest moment, something flickered in her gaze. Suspicion? Fear? Or perhaps a warning? But before Poirot could ask her a single question, she stepped back, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, leaving behind only the faint echo of her footsteps. The mystery deepened, and Poirot knew that the answers were growing more elusive with every moment. The treasure, the locket, the letter, it was all connected, but the pieces were slipping through his fingers like sand, and someone in this very house was trying to stop him from uncovering the truth. Chapter 5. The Hidden Room. The evening settled over the Sinclair estate like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The once grand manor, which seemed so imposing by daylight, now stood eerily still in the quiet of the night. The vast grounds lay in darkness, save for the soft glow of lamps casting faint shadows on the stone pathways. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the soft whispers of the wind against the windows and the occasional creak of the old beams in the walls, a reminder that this estate had been standing for centuries, holding secrets just as old. Poirot, ever the vigilant detective, found himself deep in thought as he walked alongside Hastings through the dimly lit corridors. The conversation with Lord Pembroke had only intensified the mystery. The treasure, hidden beneath the estate, was no longer just a vague rumor or a family legend. It was real, tangible, and the very key to understanding Victoria's disappearance. But where was it hidden? And why had Lord Pembroke gone to such lengths to stop her from discovering it? The more Poirot pondered the questions, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to slip further out of reach. Yet his mind, with its unparalleled precision, refused to allow him to give up. There was always a solution, a way to uncover the truth. Monsieur Poirot, Edmund said, his voice low and anxious as he walked beside the detective, there is something I haven't told you. My family has always known there were secrets in this house, but there's a room, hidden from view. It has been locked for generations. My grandfather used to speak of it, but no one has dared to go near it. Perhaps this is the place. Poirot stopped, his sharp eyes narrowing as he turned to face Edmund. A hidden room, you say? Tell me, monsieur, where can I find it? Edmund hesitated, clearly uneasy. It's behind a tapestry in the library. It was concealed, I believe, to keep whatever lies behind it out of sight. No one has dared to open it, not since my grandfather's time. Poirot's expression softened, but there was an unmistakable fire in his eyes, a fire that came to life only when he sensed the presence of a hidden truth. Then let us go to this room, Monsieur Sinclair. The time for secrets is over. The library. The library was vast, lined with shelves filled with leather-bound books that smelled of age and wisdom. The scent of old paper and dust hung in the air, creating a sense of reverence, as if the very walls of the room had witnessed countless years of history, of stories that had never been told. Poirot stood before the large, ornate tapestry that covered one of the walls. It depicted a grand scene of knights in battle, their swords raised high, as if frozen in time. The colors had faded with age, but the artistry was still evident, the fine detail of the figures captured in the weaving. Edmund, who had been trailing behind, looked at Poirot with a nervous glance. Are you certain we should do this? My family's always avoided this room. There are rumors. Poirot turned to face him, his voice calm yet filled with quiet authority. Rumors are simply the echoes of secrets, monsieur. If there is something hidden behind this tapestry, we must uncover it, for only then will we understand what happened to your sister. With that, Poirot reached out and grasped the edge of the tapestry, pulling it aside. The fabric resisted at first, but with a gentle tug, it gave way, revealing a large wooden door that had been cleverly concealed behind the cloth. The door was old, its wood darkened by time and dust. A brass handle gleamed dully in the dim light, its surface slightly tarnished. Poirot's fingers traced the edges of the door, feeling the coolness of the metal beneath his touch. This door has not been opened in many years, Poirot muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He turned the handle and pushed the door slowly open. The hidden room. Behind the door lay a small, dimly lit room, its walls lined with shelves that held old trunks, boxes, and scrolls, their contents obscured by layers of dust and cobwebs. The air in the room was stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The only source of light came from a single flickering candle on a wooden table, its flame casting long shadows that danced on the walls like ghosts of the past. Poirot stepped into the room cautiously, his every sense alert, as if the very air in this hidden space held the answers he sought. He turned to Edmund, who stood at the threshold, his face pale and apprehensive. This room, Monsieur Sinclair, it holds more than just dust. It holds the history of your family, and perhaps the truth behind your sister's disappearance. As Poirot moved further into the room, he noticed a large wooden chest in the corner, its surface scratched and worn, as though it had been moved many times. The chest seemed to call to him, its very presence radiating an aura of mystery and secrecy. Poirot knelt before it, his hands steady as he examined the lock. It was old but well made, designed to withstand time and prying eyes. "This, I believe, is where the answers lie," he murmured, his voice filled with quiet anticipation. With a soft click, the lock gave way, and Poirot lifted the lid of the chest. Inside, neatly arranged, were several bundles of papers, parchments, letters, and old photographs, each one yellowed with age. But it was one particular item that caught Poirot's eye: a small, ornate box, its surface decorated with intricate carvings. It was delicate, almost fragile, as though it had been carefully crafted for a purpose long forgotten. Poirot carefully lifted the box from the chest, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns carved into its surface. He could feel the weight of it, not just in his hands, but in his heart. This was no ordinary box. It was the key to something far greater than the Sinclair family's history. The revelation. With deliberate care, Poirot opened the box, revealing its contents: a folded piece of parchment, its edges worn and frayed. The paper was ancient, its ink faded, but the words, still legible, seemed to pulse with the weight of years gone by. Poirot unfolded the parchment, his eyes scanning the text with a quiet intensity. The letter was addressed to Victoria's great-grandfather, written in a script that was both elegant and formal. It spoke of a hidden treasure, a family legacy that had been buried beneath the estate, protected by the very walls that surrounded them. The letter revealed the truth. The treasure was not just gold or jewels, but a priceless artifact, an object of great historical significance. It was something that, if found, could change the course of history itself. And it was this artifact, the family's greatest secret, that Victoria had been so close to discovering. But there was more. The letter also spoke of a curse, a warning to those who sought the treasure. It was said that anyone who uncovered the truth would be marked, doomed to suffer the same fate as those who had tried before them. And in the darkest corner of the letter, a single name was written: Lord Pembroke. Poirot's heart quickened as he processed the information. Lord Pembroke had known about the treasure, and perhaps he had been more involved in Victoria's disappearance than anyone could have imagined. Had he sought to stop her from uncovering the family's dark legacy? Or had he been protecting it for reasons of his own? The final piece. As Poirot carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the box, a sense of finality washed over him. The hidden room had revealed its secrets, and the truth about Victoria's disappearance was beginning to take shape. But there was still one thing left to uncover: the truth behind Lord Pembroke's involvement, and whether he had been the one who took Victoria, or if someone else was working in the shadows. The mystery was far from over, but for the first time, Poirot felt certain that he was closer to the truth than ever before. And in the quiet, dusty room, amidst the shadows and forgotten legacies, he knew that the answers were waiting. The final piece of the puzzle was within his grasp, and soon the truth would be revealed in its entirety. Chapter 6. The Locket Secret. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy curtains of the Sinclair estate, casting long, soft shadows across the grand dining room, where Poirot and Hastings sat in quiet contemplation. The morning was still and serene, the world outside hushed in that precious moment before the hustle of the day began. Yet within the walls of the Sinclair family manor, a storm was brewing, quiet, unseen, but powerful in its reach. Poirot sat with his hands steepled, his sharp eyes fixed on the silver locket that lay before him on the polished table. The locket, once a simple piece of family jewelry, had transformed into the key to unlocking a mystery that spanned generations. Its presence in the case had become more than just a symbol. It was now the focal point of the entire investigation. The delicate chain, the intricate design, and the hidden message it contained were no longer just decorative details. They were the answers to questions that had long gone unanswered. As Poirot studied the locket in silence, Hastings shifted uneasily in his chair, feeling the weight of the room's quiet. "Do you think this is it, Poirot? The key to it all?" Poirot nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the locket. "Indeed, Hastings, but this is no ordinary locket. It is a relic, an object that has held secrets for far too long, and it is these secrets that will reveal the truth about Miss Victoria Sinclair's disappearance. But we must understand it fully, piece by piece." Hastings watched his friend, his curiosity piqued. "And how do we begin?" Poirot's fingers gently traced the smooth surface of the locket. His eyes narrowed as he turned it over, inspecting it with a level of care that spoke to the depth of his focus. The locket had been worn for years, perhaps decades, yet its surface showed no signs of age. It was as if it had been preserved deliberately, as if someone had wished to keep it in pristine condition. But why? "Look closely, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft yet firm. "Do you see this?" He pointed to a faint inscription that was almost invisible to the naked eye. It was delicate, almost hidden, engraved into the inner rim of the locket. Hastings leaned in closer, squinting to make out the faded letters. "It's so small, I can hardly make it out." Poirot smiled. "That is why one must always pay attention to the smallest details, mon ami. The inscription reads, 'To the one who dares to seek the truth, the past will rise to meet you.'" Hastings' eyes widened. "The past? Meeting you?" Poirot nodded, his lips pressed together in thought. "Yes, the past. This locket is not merely a piece of family history. It is a guide, a marker. It connects the present with something buried long ago. And it is no coincidence that it has found its way back into the hands of Miss Victoria Sinclair." Poirot paused, his mind racing with possibilities. What is hidden in the past? What is it that someone is trying so desperately to protect? This locket holds the key, Hastings, but it also holds a warning. The hidden connection. Poirot's voice grew softer as he placed the locket back on the table, its silver surface gleaming in the morning light. "I believe the locket is a symbol, a connection between Victoria and her great-grandfather. It was her great-grandfather who first stumbled upon the treasure, the one that was hidden beneath the estate. The locket, passed down through generations, has been a link between the past and the present, a secret that the family has guarded for years." Hastings leaned forward, eager to understand. "But why did Victoria disappear? What did she find that led her to uncover this treasure?" Poirot's gaze became distant, his mind tracing the path of the case like a map. "Your sister, Monsieur Sinclair, was not just searching for a lost artifact. She was searching for something far more valuable. The treasure was never about wealth. It was about something much more precious, a piece of history, a piece of the family legacy that, when revealed, could change everything." Poirot stood and paced slowly, his thoughts tumbling over one another like falling dominoes. The letter Miss Sinclair found, the one that warned her to stay away from the truth, was not written by just anyone. It was written by someone who feared the power that this treasure held. Someone who wanted to keep it buried, hidden, out of reach. Hastings's brow furrowed. But who would want to keep it hidden? And why go to such lengths to stop her from finding it? Poirot stopped and turned to face Hastings, his eyes narrowing with the weight of the question. Who indeed, Hastings? The answer lies not in the treasure itself, but in what it represents. It is not just a family heirloom. It is a key to something much larger, something that, if uncovered, could unravel the very fabric of the Sinclair legacy. The truth beneath the surface. Poirot and Hastings spent the rest of the morning examining the locket, turning it over in their minds and hands. There was something about the object, something deeply unsettling about its purpose, that continued to linger in the air. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of a story that had been hidden for generations. Poirot's thoughts turned to Lord Pembroke. He had known about the treasure. Of that Poirot was certain. But how deep did his involvement go? Had he simply wanted to protect it, or had he been using the treasure for his own purposes? And then there was the question of Eleanor Pembroke, who had appeared so suddenly at the estate, her eyes betraying a flicker of something Poirot could not yet decipher. The locket, in many ways, was the center of this mystery. It had ties to the Sinclair family's past, to Lord Pembroke, and to Victoria's sudden disappearance. But it also had ties to something darker, something that could not be ignored. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with possibilities. The locket, Hastings, is not just a symbol of family. It is a symbol of power. Someone has gone to great lengths to keep this power hidden. But why? What is it about the past that must remain buried? The final clue. As Poirot sat and thought, an idea slowly began to form in his mind. He stood abruptly, his eyes alight with sudden clarity. Of course, Hastings, we have been overlooking the most important detail of all. Hastings looked up, confused. What do you mean? Poirot's lips curled into a small smile. The inscription. The past will rise to meet you. It is not just a warning. It is a challenge. The locket was never meant to be a secret kept for generations. It was meant to be discovered, to rise to the surface when the time was right. He turned to face Hastings, his expression now full of determination. And now, Hastings, the time has come. We must go to the hidden room, the room beneath the estate. For I believe that it is there, beneath the very foundation of the Sinclair family legacy, where the truth is buried. And it is in that room, I am certain, where the final piece of the puzzle will reveal itself. Poirot's heart raced, but it was not fear that stirred him. It was the thrill of the chase, the knowledge that the truth, once hidden for so long, was now within his grasp. The locket had led him this far, and now, with each step, he was closer than ever to uncovering the dark secrets that had haunted the Sinclair family for generations. With Hastings at his side, Poirot turned towards the door, knowing that this final revelation would change everything. The past, so carefully guarded, was finally ready to rise to meet them. Chapter 7. The truth revealed. The shadows of dusk had already begun to stretch across the Sinclair estate, and the atmosphere inside the grand manor felt heavier than ever. The day had passed slowly, each moment laden with anticipation, each step taken by Poirot and Hastings drawing them closer to the heart of the mystery that had consumed them for days. Yet despite the overwhelming weight of the case, Poirot remained calm, his every movement measured and deliberate. He knew that the final truths were just beyond reach, hidden beneath layers of deception and fear. The locket, the hidden room, and the cryptic letter, these were the clues that had led them to this moment. The treasure, the family secrets, the dark forces that had manipulated the truth for generations, they were all interwoven into a web so complex it had taken Poirot's brilliant mind to untangle the threads. And now, the time had come to confront the final piece of the puzzle. Poirot stood in the grand drawing room, the silence stretching between him and Hastings like a taut wire, ready to snap. Edmund Sinclair had gone upstairs to rest, but Poirot could sense that he too was holding his breath, waiting for the truth to be revealed. They had uncovered much, but there was still one question left unanswered. Who was behind Victoria's disappearance, and why? Poirot's eyes flickered to the fireplace, where the soft glow of the fire illuminated the room in a golden light. He had spent hours pondering the case, turning over each detail, each clue, until finally the pieces had clicked into place. And now, as the last threads of the mystery unraveled, Poirot felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The truth was close at hand, and it would soon be brought into the light. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly, turning to face Hastings, "I believe it is time. The final secret is about to be revealed." The revelation Poirot's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it, a quiet intensity that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. As he spoke, Hastings felt a sense of both dread and excitement stir in his chest. The answer they had been seeking was just beyond the horizon, and yet the final steps to reach it felt as though they were stepping into a world that would change everything they knew. Poirot took a step closer to the fire, his silhouette illuminated by its warm glow. "The truth, Hastings, is always hiding in plain sight. We have seen it all along, but we have been too close, too consumed by the mystery to see it." Clearly, Hastings remained silent, his gaze fixed on Poirot, his mind racing. "What do you mean, Poirot? What truth?" Poirot's eyes darkened with the weight of the revelation. "It is not the treasure itself that is important. No, mon ami, the treasure is but a symbol of power, of control, of a past that some are willing to kill to keep hidden. The real truth is something far more valuable, something that could destroy everything the Sinclair family has fought to protect." He turned to face Hastings fully now, his voice lowering as if to ensure that every word was heard with the gravity it deserved. "The person behind this entire web of deception is someone who has been in plain sight all along. Someone who knew the power of the treasure and was willing to do anything to prevent it from being discovered." The sinister plot. The room was still, save for the crackling of the fire, as Poirot's words sank in. Hastings could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise, the hairs of suspense prickling his skin. "But who, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who could want this treasure so badly?" Poirot took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "The answer is simple, my dear friend. It is Lord Pembroke." Hastings blinked, taken aback by the name. "Lord Pembroke? But he's always seemed so harmless." Poirot's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Ah, Hastings, that is the genius of it. Lord Pembroke was always the one who was closest to the family. He was a friend, a confidant, a trusted figure in Victoria's life, but all along, he was hiding the truth. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice steady and deliberate. Lord Pembroke had been aware of the treasure for many years. He had known that Victoria's great-grandfather had hidden it beneath the estate, a powerful artifact that could change everything. When Victoria began to dig deeper, to uncover the truth about the treasure, Lord Pembroke feared that she would reveal what had been buried for so long. And so, he did what he had to do. Hastings' breath caught in his throat. He took her? He made her disappear? Poirot nodded slowly, his expression grave. Yes, he was desperate to keep the treasure hidden, to keep the family's darkest secret buried. And when he realized that Victoria was on the verge of uncovering it, he took matters into his own hands. He used the locket, the very object that symbolized the family's legacy, to mislead and confuse her. The final confrontation? Poirot's eyes gleamed with the clarity of someone who had just solved a puzzle, each piece falling into place with perfect precision. Lord Pembroke had been playing a dangerous game all along. He knew that the locket was more than just an heirloom. It was a marker, a key to the family's past. And when he saw that Victoria was getting too close, he took her, hiding her away where no one could find her. He made it look like she had vanished, a simple disappearance, but it was all part of his plan to keep the treasure and the family's secret hidden forever. Hastings's mind raced as he processed the information. But how do we know for certain? How do we prove it? Poirot smiled, his confidence unwavering. Ah, my friend, the evidence is all around us. Lord Pembroke's involvement is undeniable. He knew the family history, he knew the treasure's significance, and most importantly, he knew that Victoria was the one who could uncover the truth. The locket was his final attempt to mislead us, to keep us from discovering what he had done. Poirot paused, his expression softening. But now, Hastings, the truth is revealed. We have uncovered the dark legacy of the Sinclair family and the lengths to which Lord Pembroke went to keep it hidden. And now, we must confront him. The conclusion. The final steps of the investigation had brought Poirot and Hastings back to Lord Pembroke's study. Poirot had gathered the pieces of evidence, the clues that would lead to the revelation of Lord Pembroke's guilt. And now, with the truth in his hands, Poirot was ready to confront the man who had tried so desperately to conceal it. They entered the study, and Lord Pembroke looked up from his chair, his expression one of feigned calmness. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, I see you have come to an answer at last," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with unease. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes unwavering. "Yes, Monsieur Pembroke, the truth is clear. You took Miss Victoria Sinclair, for she was on the verge of uncovering your darkest secret, the treasure that has been buried beneath the estate for generations." Lord Pembroke's face paled, but he quickly regained his composure. "You know nothing, Poirot. You don't understand the danger of what you're meddling with." "Oh, but I do, Monsieur Pembroke," Poirot replied, his voice cold with certainty. "The treasure is not just a family heirloom. It is a legacy, a power that you were willing to kill to protect. And now, with your confession, the mystery is solved. You can no longer hide behind lies." Lord Pembroke's shoulders sagged in defeat as he realized the game was up. "I did what I had to do," he whispered. "I couldn't let the treasure be found. It was too dangerous, too powerful." Poirot shook his head. "But Monsieur Pembroke, the truth always finds a way to rise to the surface. And now, it is time for you to face the consequences of your actions. As Poirot's words settled in the room, Hastings looked at him with a sense of awe. The mystery, so deeply woven into the fabric of the Sinclair family's history, had been untangled at last. The truth had come to light, and justice was about to be served. And as the first rays of dawn crept through the windows, Poirot knew that, once again, he had solved the case. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The early morning mist had cleared by the time Poirot and Hastings made their way through the labyrinthine halls of the Sinclair estate, their footsteps echoing softly against the ancient floors. The air, which had once felt thick with anticipation and uncertainty, now felt heavier with the weight of the truth. The hour had come for the final confrontation. The hidden secrets, the tangled web of lies, and the dark legacy of the Sinclair family were all laid bare. Yet there remained one final step in this intricate dance. A confrontation with the man who had orchestrated the entire scheme. Lord Pembroke. Poirot's calm demeanor had not wavered since his discovery of the truth. In the moments leading up to this, he had shown no sign of hesitation. For Poirot, there was always a final moment when the puzzle snapped into place. And once that moment arrived, all that was left was the inevitable reckoning. "We are not merely solving a case now, Hastings," Poirot said, as they approached the study where Lord Pembroke awaited them. "We are unveiling a truth that has been buried for far too long. The consequences, once revealed, are unavoidable." Hastings, though deeply impressed by Poirot's unshakable confidence, could not help but feel the weight of the moment. The man they were about to face had been more than just a neighbor to the Sinclairs. He had been a trusted friend, a figure in the family's life for many years. Yet beneath that facade of friendship, there had been a secret as dark as the shadows that now stretched across the estate. They reached the study, the grand oak door looming before them like an ancient guardian of forgotten truths. Poirot turned the handle slowly and pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit room. Lord Pembroke sat behind his desk, his posture straight and formal, but the lines of worry were evident in his face. The very air in the room felt heavy with the knowledge that the endgame had arrived. Lord Pembroke glanced up at the entrance, his eyes briefly meeting Poirot's before he sighed, a long, weary exhale that seemed to carry the weight of his guilt. He had known this moment would come, but he had hoped against hope that it might be postponed. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Lord Pembroke greeted them, his voice far softer than it had been in previous encounters. "I suppose you've come to tell me that the game is over." Poirot's gaze never wavered as he stepped forward, his presence calm yet commanding. "Indeed, Monsieur Pembroke, the game is over. It has been for some time now." There was no mockery in Poirot's voice, no sense of triumph. His words were calm, almost pitying, as if speaking to a man who had long been lost in his own web of lies. Lord Pembroke's fingers drummed lightly on the surface of his desk as he shifted in his seat, his expression betraying a flicker of panic. "I never wanted this," Lord Pembroke murmured, his voice thick with frustration. "I never wanted anyone to suffer because of it. But I had no choice." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in the man before him. He had seen this kind of desperation before, the kind that followed years of living with a secret too heavy to bear. And yet, Lord Pembroke was no ordinary man. He was not merely someone who had acted out of fear or greed. There was something deeper, something far more complex that had driven him to take such extreme measures. "You had a choice, Monsieur Pembroke," Poirot said softly. "The choice you made was to protect the family legacy at all costs, even at the expense of Miss Victoria Sinclair's life." Lord Pembroke's eyes darkened. "You don't understand," he said, his voice sharp now, a flash of anger breaking through his calm facade. "I was protecting her. All of this, the treasure, the locket, the lies, it was all for her. She was too reckless, too curious. She had to be stopped before she uncovered the truth." Poirot's gaze softened, his tone gentler than before. "Miss Sinclair did not seek to destroy your family's legacy, monsieur. She simply sought to understand it. What she uncovered was not a treasure of gold or jewels, but a truth far more dangerous, a truth that you could not allow her to share." Lord Pembroke's hands clenched into fists. "The treasure was never meant to be found," he spat, his voice rising with emotion. "It was too dangerous. It held the power to unravel everything, to expose everything, the family, the history, everything that we've built. That's why I did what I did." The room seemed to grow heavier with every word Lord Pembroke spoke, as if the very walls of the study could no longer hold the weight of his confession. Hastings, though silent, could feel the tension in the air, the sense that this moment would define everything. Poirot's eyes never left Lord Pembroke. "You believe the treasure was dangerous, but it was not the treasure itself that posed the greatest threat. It was the truth about your family's past, and that truth was never yours to hide, monsieur." For a long moment there was silence, save for the crackling of the fire in the hearth. The tension was palpable, as though every word spoken between Poirot and Lord Pembroke carried the weight of centuries of hidden history. The confession. Finally, Lord Pembroke spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did what I had to do. I couldn't let her ruin everything. The treasure, it was never meant to be found by anyone. It was meant to stay buried forever." Poirot stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "You had no right to take her, monsieur. No right to keep the truth from her, from anyone." Lord Pembroke's eyes seemed to lose focus for a moment, his gaze distant, as though he were reliving the events in his mind. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he murmured, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting her from something far worse. The treasure was never meant to be exposed. It was never meant to bring ruin to the family. But I see now." He trailed off, his voice fading as the weight of his actions settled over him. Poirot stood in front of him, his expression solemn. "It is not too late to make amends, Monsieur Pembroke. The truth must come out, for it will bring justice to Miss Sinclair and to the family you sought to protect." Lord Pembroke lowered his head, his shoulders slumped with the crushing weight of his guilt. "I am ready to face whatever comes next," he whispered, his voice filled with a sense of resignation. "I have lived in fear for far too long. It's time for the truth to be known." Poirot gave a small, sad nod. "The truth, Monsieur Pembroke, has a way of finding its way to the surface. It cannot be hidden forever." With that, Poirot turned to Hastings, who stood silently by his side, watching the entire scene unfold. "We must return to the estate," Poirot said quietly. "The truth must be revealed, and justice must be done." The final steps. As Poirot and Hastings made their way back to the main part of the estate, The air outside had taken on the cool crispness of evening. The estate, which had been so full of secrets, now seemed somehow quieter, as though the very house was holding its breath. Lord Pembroke's confession was the key that unlocked everything. The treasure, the hidden room, the locket, everything had led to this moment. The truth, finally laid bare, would change the Sinclair family forever. But as Poirot had known all along, the truth was not something to be feared. It was something that had to be faced, no matter the consequences. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting the estate in a deep golden light, Poirot knew that the case had come to its end. The mystery had been solved, the villain confronted, and the truth had been set free. And in that quiet, soothing moment, Poirot allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The puzzle had been solved. Chapter 9. A calm resolution. The sun had long since set, casting the Sinclair estate in a tranquil twilight that felt almost too peaceful for the storm of secrets that had just been revealed. The heavy, oppressive air of mystery had finally lifted, leaving a quiet stillness in its wake, as though the very house itself was taking a deep, relieved breath. Poirot, standing in the now dimly lit drawing room, felt the weight of the case begin to dissolve, as though the answers had finally settled into place, like the final piece of a puzzle slipping into its rightful position. The quiet that surrounded him now was not one of uncertainty or dread, but of finality, a conclusion that had been carefully, meticulously built over days of investigation, of untangling a web of lies and half-truths. As Poirot stood there, his eyes still sharp, but now tinged with a sense of calm satisfaction, Hastings lingered nearby, still processing the revelations they had just uncovered. For Hastings, the final truths had been like a curtain lifting, exposing a darkness he had never imagined in Lord Pembroke, the man who had once been so trusted by the Sinclair family. "You were right all along, Poirot," Hastings murmured, his voice quiet, almost reverential. "It was Pembroke, but why didn't we see it sooner?" Poirot offered a small, understanding smile. "Ah, Hastings, my friend, the truth always lies beneath the surface. It is only when one stops looking too closely that the real answers begin to reveal themselves." He paused for a moment, his thoughts drifting back to the intricately woven puzzle that had led them here. The locket, the cryptic letter, Lord Pembroke's hidden guilt, and the treasure buried beneath the Sinclair estate. They had all seemed like disparate threads, each tugging in different directions, until at last they had converged, revealing the dark heart of the mystery. Now, with the confession of Lord Pembroke, the mystery had come to its end. The treasure had been found. The secret of Victoria Sinclair's disappearance had been revealed. But there was still one thing left to do: to bring resolution to the Sinclair family. The family's peace. The following morning the air was crisp and fresh, the sun shining brightly across the estate. The estate, so steeped in history, now felt a little less heavy, a little less burdened by the past. The Sinclair family had gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of disbelief, relief, and sorrow. It had been a long, difficult journey for them all, but now the truth was in the open, and with it, the chance to heal. Edmund Sinclair, though still bearing the weight of the recent revelations, looked less burdened than he had the day before. The uncertainty that had clouded his eyes had finally begun to lift, replaced with the understanding that the secrets of his family's past could no longer haunt them in the same way. Poirot, standing quietly by the hearth, observed the family's interactions with a calm but knowing eye. He had seen the toll that secrets could take on people, how the burden of the past could twist and contort relationships until they became something unrecognizable. But he also knew that the truth, painful though it may be, was the only path to true healing. As Edmund addressed his family, his voice was steady, but there was a softness to it now, a sense of reconciliation. "We have all lived in the shadow of secrets for far too long," he said, his words carrying the weight of the past. "But it is time for us to face the truth, to allow it to set us free. We owe it to Victoria to honor her memory and her pursuit of the truth." His eyes turned to Lord Pembroke, who sat quietly, his face pale with the realization of what had happened. There was no anger in Edmund's voice, no condemnation, only a deep, aching sorrow. "The truth has come to light, and we must all bear the consequences of our actions. But we can still choose how we move forward." Lord Pembroke, his face a mask of regret, looked up at Edmund, his voice barely a whisper. "I am sorry," he said, his voice cracking with the weight of guilt. "I thought I was protecting you all, but I see now that I was only protecting myself. The treasure was never meant to be found. I didn't realize that in trying to keep it hidden, I was destroying everything." Poirot, who had been watching the exchange, stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Monsieur Pembroke, the truth has a way of revealing itself, even when we try to bury it. But now, it is time for all of you to move forward. The past cannot be undone, but you can choose how to honor it." As he spoke, Poirot's mind drifted to the resolution of the case. The treasure, the artifact buried beneath the estate, was indeed a powerful symbol, but it had never been the true focus of the investigation. It was the uncovering of the family's secrets, the revealing of the darkness that had been kept hidden, that had led them to this moment of peace. The family, while grieving the loss of Victoria and the life they had lost, could now begin to heal, knowing that the truth was no longer a shadow hanging over them. The treasure, whatever its significance, would no longer hold the family in its grasp. The calm. After the storm. With the family now coming to terms with the revelations, Poirot turned his attention to Edmund, who was deep in conversation with his mother. Hastings, sensing that the case was finally winding down, looked at Poirot with a mixture of admiration and relief. "Well, Poirot, I must admit, I did not see it all coming," Hastings said with a half smile. "But you always seem to know where to look, don't you?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Ah, Hastings, it is not about knowing where to look, but knowing when to stop searching. The truth always reveals itself when the time is right." The two men stood together in the quiet of the room, taking in the scene before them. The Sinclair family was not yet healed, but they had taken the first step toward peace. There was still work to be done, still a future to build, but for now, the storm had passed. Poirot turned toward the door, his coat swishing lightly with his movement. He had done his part. He had solved the case, uncovered the truth, and set the stage for the family to move forward. His work was done. "Shall we go, Hastings?" Poirot asked, his voice calm and steady as ever. Hastings nodded, a slight chuckle escaping him. "After you, Poirot. After you." As the two men walked toward the door, The sound of their footsteps mingled with the soft murmur of the Sinclair family, now beginning to rebuild in the light of truth. The estate, once a place of secrets and shadows, now felt lighter, as though the very walls had been released from the burden of the past. Poirot paused at the threshold, casting a final glance over his shoulder at the family in the room. The case had been solved, but the real work was just beginning for them. The truth had come to light, and with it, the possibility of redemption. And in that moment, as the door closed softly behind them, Poirot felt a rare sense of contentment. The case was over. The truth had been revealed. And though the journey had been long, the resolution was as soothing and fulfilling as a quiet sunset on a peaceful evening. Chapter 10. The Final Farewell. The final rays of the setting sun bathed the Sinclair estate in a soft golden glow, casting long shadows across the sprawling grounds. The once somber and tension-filled manor now seemed to sigh with a quiet relief, as if the very walls had finally exhaled after holding their breath for generations. The mystery that had haunted the Sinclair family for so long, with its dark secrets, hidden treasures, and painful truths, had reached its conclusion. The truth had come to light, the family was on its way to healing, and justice had been served. Poirot, standing in the garden just beyond the grand steps of the estate, looked up at the sky, watching as the last vestiges of daylight faded into the cool embrace of twilight. The cool breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it a quiet sense of finality, a calm that had been long overdue. The estate, once filled with shadows and secrets, now felt peaceful, as if the very air itself had been cleansed. Hastings, standing beside Poirot, glanced around, his expression a mixture of contentment and reflection. "It's over, Poirot," Hastings said softly, his gaze lingering on the estate. "The family is at peace, and the mystery has been solved. I can't help but feel relieved." Poirot turned to his old friend, his sharp eyes reflecting the warmth of the fading sunlight. "Indeed, Hastings, the truth is always the final step, the moment that clears the fog and allows us to see what has been hidden for so long." He paused for a moment, his mind running over the events of the past days. The locket, the hidden room, the treasure beneath the estate. All of it had led to this moment, a moment of quiet resolution. The Sinclair family, now free from the weight of their dark past, could begin to rebuild, to move forward. The secret that had torn them apart, the family legacy shrouded in mystery and lies, had finally been uncovered. And with that came the opportunity for peace. The journey's end, as Poirot and Hastings made their way toward the estate's grand front steps, Edmund Sinclair and the rest of the family emerged from the house. Edmund, his posture straighter and his expression more at ease, walked slowly toward them. The shadows of the past had not disappeared completely, but they no longer loomed over him, and there was a sense of hope in his eyes that had been absent since the beginning of the case. "Monsieur Poirot," Edmund said, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. "I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done. You've given us back something we never thought we'd find again. Peace." Poirot offered a small, knowing smile. "It is not I who should be thanked, Monsieur Sinclair. The truth was always there, waiting to be uncovered. It was your family that did the hardest work, facing the past and choosing to move forward." Edmund nodded, his eyes now reflecting a quiet understanding. "I know, but still, Your guidance helped us see what we couldn't before. My family has been through so much, but now we can finally start anew." Poirot gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his lips curling into the slightest of smiles. "It is my pleasure, monsieur. It is not always the solving of the mystery that brings peace, but the understanding that comes with it. Your family has carried the weight of secrets for far too long. Now, you are free to live without them." As Edmund looked toward his family, his mother, his younger siblings, and Lord Pembroke, who stood a little further behind, his face still etched with regret and sorrow, he saw them all for the first time without the burden of their hidden past weighing them down. Though they would always carry the scars of what had happened, there was now a chance to heal. The legacy of the Sinclair family, so steeped in shadows, could finally take its place in the light. Lord Pembroke, who had remained largely silent since the revelation, approached the group with slow, deliberate steps. His face, though still marked by the guilt of his actions, was also touched by something else, a quiet resolve. He was no longer the man who had hidden behind his power and his fear. He was, for the first time, a man who could face the consequences of his actions. "Poirot," Lord Pembroke said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, I owe you an apology for everything. I thought I was protecting them, protecting the family, but I see now that I only caused more pain." Poirot studied Lord Pembroke for a long moment, his gaze never leaving the man's face. "You have made amends, monsieur. That is all anyone can do. The past cannot be undone, but it can be understood. And with understanding comes the chance for forgiveness." Lord Pembroke nodded, a flicker of something like relief passing across his face. He had been living under the weight of his guilt for so long, but now, in the presence of those he had wronged, there was a small glimmer of hope. A quiet farewell. With the family gathered around, Poirot and Hastings stood at the foot of the steps, ready to take their leave. The case, once so tangled and fraught with danger, was now over. The truth had been uncovered, the villain confronted, and justice had been served. The Sinclair family, though not without their scars, was now free to move forward. And with that, Poirot knew that his work here was done. "Are you ready to go, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice gentle as if sensing the quiet moment of finality that lingered in the air. Poirot turned to him, his sharp eyes softening for just a moment. "Yes, Hastings, it is time to move on. The case is over, and we have done what we set out to do. There is nothing more to be said." As the two men turned to leave, Poirot cast one last glance back at the estate, now bathed in the soft light of the evening. The grand house, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now seemed at peace. The secrets had been uncovered, the mysteries resolved, and the family was free to begin anew. With a small sigh, Poirot nodded to himself, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It is always the truth that sets us free," he said softly, more to himself than to Hastings. "And when the truth is revealed, peace follows." Hastings smiled, following his friend down the path that led away from the estate. As they walked side by side, the last remnants of the case, of the dark legacy that had haunted the Sinclair family for so long, faded into the past, where they belonged. The sun had set, but a new dawn was just beginning for the Sinclairs, and as Poirot and Hastings left the estate behind, the quiet peace of resolution settled in the air, like a soft, soothing lullaby, carrying with it the promise of a future untouched by the shadows of the past.